Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 3 of Jessica Jones. Like always, I'm going to start off with a non-spoiler review, and then I will make a clear point to be like, this is where I'm going to talk about spoilers. So to basically, right off the bat, how did I feel about the season in general? I thought it was great. Once again, I always say this, but it's like this really has some stuff in it. I didn't expect a lot of storylines to close out the way they did. It left me going like, holy crap, that's one way to finish this up, especially this being the final season and stuff like that. But I'll kind of, dive into that a little bit more later on. But there were a lot of twists and turns, situations I wasn't expecting, but I think it was such a beautiful conclusion for so many stories that, just overall the season was great. I just loved everything that they did, and it's just kind of interesting. So that's where my mindset is. That's as non-spoiler review as you're going to get. Going forward, I will be going into spoilers. So if you have not seen all of Jessica Jones Season 3, do not listen for it because I will go into the spoilers. But do know, I guess to finish up my non-spoiler stuff, I guess I'd just say it is well worth your time. It is, it is, I guess I should say that. Like, it is conclusive enough that you can be like, yeah, it ends off on a satisfying enough note where, like I said, everything kind of closes. I know that's a little spoilerish in itself, but, like I said, I'll elaborate more in detail. So, like, it is well worth it, and it's not like, oh, it ends up on a big cliffhanger or something like that. Like I said, I'll go into more details, but it ends off on enough of a note that I think everyone could walk away satisfied that the story's played out to their conclusion. So we'll leave it at that and then start entering into spoilers. So once again, going forward, I will be talking about spoilers, so do be warned. Okay, this is a pretty heavy ass season with a lot of stuff that went down. I really like, for one, Jessica's, obviously she did what she's done, but overall I feel like this is the most consistent Jessica's been over the course of a season of her heroism. I mean, to be fair, because for her, she's kind of being pulled in so many different directions because she's got to live up to the expectations her mom had of her. Like, you're the hero. Everyone kind of looks at her as a hero for being the one that put her mom down. Obviously, she's still off the whole Kilgrave situation too, so everyone's kind of looking at her as a hero, and she's trying to live up to that expectations. Her and Trish are still not talking and stuff like that. And I think, I'm going to be bouncing around a lot, so I do apologize. But I do like what they did with Trish in the sense of, like, there's at least 2 episodes we get from her perspective, and I thought that was so genius. Because obviously the show is, like, always mainly from Jessica's perspective. I mean, obviously not necessarily, but it's like we get a lot of her point of view because we get her inner monologue a lot, which is interesting. I mean, it fits the detective noir aesthetic. I don't think I've ever brought that up before, but it's like it's the only show where you get the hero's inner thoughts like that. No other show really tells you what the hero is thinking except for this one. So I think that's such a unique thing to this. But like I said, it's also kind of, I think it's kind of a part of that detective noir type of aesthetic as well, but nevertheless, but I did like that though. Like, the second episode is literally like, oh, what's Trish been up to in between seasons? It literally picks up at the end of season 2 where it's like, holy crap, I got powers. I love that she tries it again and it fails, and I'm like, oh, okay. I was like, so her powers only work every once in a while, right? But it's like, no, because she hadn't trained to really, because I guess for Jessica it was just kind of like a natural flex. I guess for her, I mean, to be fair, Jessica's had her powers ever since she was a teenager, so it's a little different. But I guess, it's just like she had to, Trish had to train herself to kind of get her powers, in check and stuff like that and use them. And I love that she celebrates. She's like, yeah, but she has no one to celebrate it with because, for one, the one person she confided in about all this is Jessica, but Jessica's still pissed about the whole, like, oh yeah, you killed my mom situation. Not easily going to let that go. And I love that is, a point of, like, tension that isn't just going to be let go, because it's like, no, you took away someone very important to me, and that causes issues between them still, even when they kind of potentially repair the relationship, it kind of still falls apart a little bit because that's still that, elephant in the room of like, yeah, you're still the one that killed my mom. So it's that situation where it's like you understand where Jessica's coming from, but you also understand where, Trish is coming from. It's like, your mom was a mass murderer, yes, but she was still my mom. You shouldn't have been the one to do it. There might have been some other way, But even later on, I thought it was kind of neat where Trish was like, I wish I hadn't killed your mom. And, Jessica's like, I wish my mom wasn't a mass murderer, So, but I'm all over the place once again. I do like just little relationships too. I like her and Costa cost being buddy in this. I won't lie to you, I thought he was dead in this season. Like, there was no point where his life was actually in danger, but I just had an inkling about it, just because it's like, oh yeah, we learn a lot more about his like home life, his husband, them wanting to adopt and stuff. I'm like, oh dude, that would suck. But to be fair, because I think, you know what was also in the back of my mind, the detective from season 1 of Jessica Jones died too. You know, Simpson killed him, remember? So like, I think maybe that was kind of, but I was thinking like, oh man, that kind of sucked, because we're getting to know him, and the fact is him and Jessica are on really good terms. They were on good terms last season, but even more so after everything. And he kind of looks out for her, like, you know, pushes some stuff her way, kind of jobs and stuff like that. You know, like stuff that kind of slips through the cracks a little bit. Nothing too wild, but obviously he helps her out every once in a while. Like, I love them being buddy like that. I thought that was pretty neat. But dude, there's just so much to break down. Okay. Jessica and Eric. I didn't know what to expect of Eric. Obviously, he shows up, he's super pessimistic and stuff like that, and I love that him and Jessica kind of hit off like that, but I thought it was so neat when we find out he actually has powers, and I love that reference where Jessica was like, yeah, the last time I didn't believe someone about their powers, you know, scaffolding or whatever kind of fell on them and stuff like that. It's like, right, the wizard, poor bastard. But I thought it was kind of interesting, and I like Eric's ability where basically he senses like the darkness, the evil in someone, and like the more evil they are and the closer they are to him, the more pain it causes him. And that was a really interesting development when it comes to, you know, Salinger. I'll get to that situation in a little bit, but you know, it's like the whole like, oh, it don't just physically hurts him, it literally manifests itself as his eyes and like nose bleeding and stuff. I was like, holy shit, it really fucks you up when someone really evil is nearby. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting element. But how did I feel about Salinger as a villain? I thought it was really interesting because I think he's a very different villain that Jessica's never faced off against before. Because you could say, you know, like, Kilgrave is, I will still state, is my favorite. I think David Tennant killed the role. I just think, obviously, the connection between him and Jessica made that so impactful. That's also another thing, too. Like, Jessica and her mom, like, that like was a complicated relationship. But so obviously Kilgrave's my favorite, but I really liked her mom as a villain too. But that, she was a villain, but it was a complicated situation. Salinger is like a just full on. He's a Dexter level villain. He kills a whole bunch of people. Apparently, he's been doing it for like over a decade or whatever. I'm about to say 10 decades, over a decade or whatever. And I was like, oh man, that was so interesting to me because I was wondering what the connection was going to be. It's like, there is no connection. She got his way, and it's like, oh, he wasn't even coming after her. She just literally was in the way. That was actually kind of surprising when she gets stabbed at the end of the first episode. I was like, Jesus. I mean, that's something you also had to think about too. It's like, and that's something Jessica ends up bringing up too. It's like, I'm not invulnerable. I'm not bulletproof like Luke. The fact of the matter is, she has the anatomy of a human. Like, she can die, she can bleed. She isn't, she ain't on some like God level stuff. She's like, because I'm sure, even Captain America would die from like being stabbed at the right place or shot. Because they're just not like gods. They're superhuman, sure, but they're still human on many different regards. So. But it turned out like their true target was Eric, because he does a whole thing of like blackmailing people, because it's like, oh, I get this feeling about them because of my ability. And it's like, oh, I know what you did. He kind of keeps it super vague like that. It's like, pay me or you're screwed. I'm surprised his issues didn't come up more than they did. Like the whole aspect of him being like having gambling issues and stuff like that. I thought that might be a bigger issue than what it comes up like once later in the season, but it's like a one-off conversation of like, get me in touch with whatever, trying to set up a gambling thing just because it was his way of, de-stressing. But it was like, it never came up again. I mean, I guess the whole Sal situation kind of got paid off because it's like, oh yeah, everyone got hurt. Sal almost got killed. And obviously, Eric paid off the money, so I guess that was just kind of, it is what it is. I guess he was so caught up with so much other stuff, but nevertheless, I went super off track. So getting back to it, the point I was trying to make about Salinger, Greg, I'll just call him Salinger. The fact is that he was meticulous. None of Jessica's other villains were meticulous. Like, obviously, Kilgrave manipulated people. He said some stuff in advance, but he wasn't that, like, smart of a villain. And, Alyssa did everything by impulse. Like, she was kind of controlled by her emotions. And just kind of, like, the whole thing of, like, she flew into a rage and stuff like that. So she was very impulsive. He's meticulous, like, the way he does things. He set everything up to make it so that, like, obviously he's faking, trying to be like, oh, help. Like, he's faking the victim role, and And I love too that Jessica's like, oh, I could just punch him and beat the crap out of him. It's like, no, got to get a piece of crap like this the right way. And that's why I was talking about like her approach this season of doing the right thing. It's like, I'm kind of in that hero mode, and I feel like, yeah, she does some stuff here and there, but I think that stuff that she did still kind of aligns with the whole hero realm. Like, it's that whole complicated nature of, you know, being a hero, looking after, doing the right thing versus protecting the people you care about. I mean, that's always been something she's kind of struggled with, you know? That's been a constant thing in her obviously that was a big part last season too, but like, I really liked her doing everything, you know, this season, like, you know, trying to do it the right way, even working with Costa on moments and be like, no, we got to handle it this way. But Trish, obviously, you know, because I was wondering what Trish's role was going to be like as the hero, you know, the whole Hellcat situation, or like what her whole deal was going to be, because I was like, oh, is she a cat burglar or something? It's like, to a certain extent, yes, but only kind of with that particular case, because it's like, okay, she was trying to steal the statue from that dude, and everything, because it's like, oh, I'm trying to, this guy stole the statue. It's proof of the fact is that he had his sister beat up and stuff like that, that he's a terrible person. And the fact is that she was trying to get the evidence however she could. Like, and it's so interesting because, you know, the whole conversation is about Trish wanting, she's trying to be the hero that she feels like Jessica should have been but wasn't, you know? And for her, it's like, you don't have to be the hero anymore. No one's putting that pressure on you. I'll take up that role, you know, because all this started because Dorothy called her and to be like, oh, look for Trish. Trish is in trouble and stuff like that. And Jessica, no matter how pissed she is at Trish, the fact is she was still worried nonetheless. And she's like, fine, I'll take the job, you know? So then there's everything with Malcolm. I was actually kind of surprised we didn't see anything of Price. I think it's kind of neat how they handled everything, because there's obviously certain elements from season 2. It's like, oh, what about the whole Oscar thing? That's what I was wondering about. It's like, oh, she made it kind of clear between her and Oscar, like she couldn't really open up to him, but she was still pretty tight with Vito. So it's like, yeah, you know, I'm only friends with you, you know, because I'm friends with your son, right? And, you know, Oscar was kind of cool with that, you know. It's like, you know, it's sad things kind of ended that way for them, but it was just type of thing. Obviously Jessica kind of keeps people at a distance, and it's just like not really being able to open up to people kind of makes the relationship hard, you know. So I was curious how they were handling it. Sadly, we don't really see either one of them, but I think that was just kind of being like, we're kind of telling a different story, so we need to kind of move away from that situation. You know, it played its part in season 2, so let's move away from that and kind of continue telling a different story, mixing in continuing the story while mixing in a new story to kind of push our characters forward type of situation. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. But like the whole thing about like, oh yeah, Price didn't return, but obviously like Malcolm's working for Hogarth, and I think that was a nice progression for his character too, because that's always been Malcolm's thing of like, oh, obviously like he had his issues in season 1, the whole Kilgrave situation and addiction, and obviously season 2 he kind of tried to find another outlet for his addiction by like sleeping with as many women as possible, or, you know, jumping headfirst into work and stuff like that. James didn't work out, but now it's like, okay, he wants to work, you know, with Hogarth, because it's like, oh, build my name up and reputation. I can have the money to kind of do my own thing. Hogarth has him doing a lot of dirty work, because obviously, like, he's like, I'm an investigator, not a fixer, but he kind of plays both roles. It's like, but even then, like, he strayed that line, and I think that was the beautiful nature of this season. Everyone skirted the line so much between their, like, the 3 focuses being Jessica, Trish, and Malcolm. And I guess you can include Eric in that as well, like them skirting that line between, you know, just pushing that line a little bit further back. I mean, Jessica in some regards, but I feel like not nearly as much as everyone else. You know, especially everything Malcolm was doing, like that baseball player. Well, he's a baseball player, right? That sports dude that it's like, oh yeah, like the car accident happened. It's like, yeah, you take this dude's car, it's yours now. We pretend like this doesn't happen. So it's like babysitting people like that kind of ends up being in Malcolm's purview. He's working with his girlfriend, Zaya, at Hogarth's. Obviously, it's still the whole ALS situation that she's not really explaining to anyone. I don't think anyone else knew. It never came up in conversation. I mean, to be fair, Jerry's a very prideful person, so she never wants to look weak or anything in front of anyone else. I thought it was kind of interesting later on. Was it like Benowitz came because it's like, oh, things aren't doing well. I'll get to that soon enough. But the fact of the matter is that they were trying to take Rand from her, and she's like, Danny would never let that happen. It's like, well, Danny's kind of on an excursion, because I was like, I was wondering, because obviously Rand came up before. I was like, I'm wondering what Rand's situation is. I was like, I bet you Danny's still on his off on his journey with Ward, isn't he? And it's like, yeah, because board of directors are like, because of your situation, you and your firm, Jerry, we're kind of moving away. I'll kind of get to that soon enough. I thought that was kind of a nice little wink to be like, oh yeah, in this continuity of like time frame, it's like, yeah, you have Danny and Ward are potentially still off doing their thing like they were at the end of season 2 of Iron Fist. So I don't know, little details like that I thought was kind of nice. That's kind of an interesting situation, kind of once again like Hogarth being the devil, and it's like, it's so crazy because I feel like Hogarth, Jerry, you thought she would learn her lesson. She literally has gone from every season still being the biggest piece of crap. She just finds new means and new ways. I mean, to be fair, season 2, it seemed like she might have had some redemption arc, but then it immediately, like, she kind of slipped back into herself a lot more when the whole, Shane Inez situation played out the way it did. But it's like, basically to hook up with her ex, Kith, she ends up trying to dig up dirt on Peter, and it's like, oh, we're in an open relationship, and she's like, damn it, Malcolm, dig deeper, and finds out that basically he was skimming funds off his dead daughter's foundation, a foundation built in his dead daughter's name. And I was like, Jesus, that sucks. And then the whole thing sends him in a spiral to the point he commits suicide and makes this whole big video of like, oh, Jerry represents these terrible people with superpowers and stuff like that. I thought that was technically going to be a bigger thing than it was. I guess it kind of feeds into the narrative of kind of like the whole anti-superhero thing, which I kind of felt like was going to be potentially a thing this season. I thought that was going to be like Salinger's like motivation. I'll get to that in a second. But it was so fascinating because I was like, okay, that was going to be a bigger thing than it was. It comes up here and there. It still ends up being that thing of like, and it's so interesting because I feel like it's an issue in the movies, but it always gets focused more on the TV shows of like, oh, people with power, stay away from them, they're freaks. Whether you be, enhanced, people, or, in humans, for example, that's always going to be an issue. I mean, to be fair, that plays into like the mutants as well, so that shouldn't be too surprised. I know that doesn't exist in this continuity, but I'm still using them as a reference, just as a Marvel reference in general. But nevertheless, I was like, man, she's got that weighing on her. Like, Jerry felt bad, but at the same time, it's that thing about Jerry where he's like, is she feeling bad? She's feeling bad more so for Keth, because it's like, you love her, you care about her. And that's also another thing, too. It's like, the reason why you're trying to do all this is because you're running out of time and you want to be back with the person that you were in love with all those years ago. And she's always kept an eye on her. They haven't met in the 20-odd years since they broke up, but she's always kept an eye out, kind of basically secretly stalking her from afar, essentially. Or, like I said, always keeping up with her accomplishments and everything. So that was an interesting development. And then you had, like, but getting back to it, it kind of all, like I said, I'm bleeding all these storylines together because they all will kind of line up. But the whole, like, Hogarth representing Salinger, it's like, why would you do that? It's like, and even Jessica brings it up, it's like, you're literally joining up with another psycho. And I brought this up when I was talking about the trailer. It's like, you've literally been down this road before with Kilgrave. How did that situation work out with you? Oh, how about the whole Wendy situation? And I love when she met, with Keth, it's like, oh, you bring up the fact is Wendy's dead. You never bring up how Wendy ended up dying, and the fact is it was basically your fault. But it's like the whole thing of like that's what tripped me out about Jerry. She's always kind of demonized people and stuff like that. Like, oh, no one's above the law. These superpowered people think they're above the law. It's like, really? Miss, I'm gonna use Kilgrave to get what I want? Miss, I set up that whole Inez and Shane thing in season 2. It's like, you are the biggest hypocrite. You literally use your powers and resources to destroy a man's marriage. I mean, yes, it's not necessarily illegal. It's extremely douchey, but it's not illegal. But it's like she acted like she was some saint or something like that. That's what kind of tripped me. I'm like, you're the biggest hypocrite. Like, above the law, you should be in jail for so much stuff that you've done. But to be fair, a lot of that stuff was you indirectly. You literally put the gun in Inez's hands because you were vindictive. You wanted to get revenge. You set up the whole Wendy and Pam situation. Even Pam was kind of like, nah, fuck you. Like, I'm done with this whole situation. So it's just crazy to me. And that's the thing. It's like this dude. It's like, oh, he's allegedly, suspected of being this serial killer and literally chopping up people's body, literally on some Dexter shit. That you're so okay with it, And that's that complicated thing because Zaya kind of brings this up too, the Malcolm and being like, we're not here to be. We're just here to do what like. There's the checks and balances that basically the law is the way it is. So it shouldn't be some situation of like, oh, we just completely judge on this or put our feelings in it. We need to go by the law. We're here defending him. That's what we should be doing. And it's like, but the thing is, Jerry didn't have to take it. Jerry literally took it because she wanted a high profile case just so it could put her firm back on the map and stuff like that. What I thought was interesting too is at first when Salinger is like bashing Jessica in the news, like Jerry's kind of like, well, maybe it's a misunderstanding because no matter what the complicated relationship her and Jessica have, she does kind of like Jessica. It even comes up later on of like, yeah, Jessica actually respects you, and that's not the easiest thing to have is Jessica's respect, I just thought that was kind of such a fascinating little thing. But talking about Salinger like as a villain and stuff like that, it's so interesting because like he ends up proving himself to be kind of a threat, but I love like the psychology behind why he is the way he is. Basically, he feels inadequate, and it kind of feeds into the whole aspect of like, I kind of figured like, oh, it's like because these people with powers have powers. That's what you don't like. It's like for him, it's like they're cheaters is kind of what it is. I'm like, what? It's almost like he's pissed that it's like, oh, you found me out because you have powers. It's almost not a fair match. For him, it's like humans, regular people, get to where they are by harnessing their skills through blood, sweat, and tears, essentially. And for him, it's like you never had to work a hard day in your life. It's like that's such a bullshit thing to say because it's like it was just interesting to me to hear that because we kind of learned from him. It's like he got belittled by his dad and his brother. The moment his brother died, his dad kind of like took a lot of stuff and hit him with it, and it's like his upbringing, feeling inadequate is what this is all about. He's talking about he wants to find people's truths and stuff like that. Want to expose Jessica because it's like, oh, people think you're a hero. It's like, no, you're a fraud, because it's almost like he's trying to glorify himself of being like, look what I'm doing. Because that's what a lot of his targets were. They were frauds. They were people who were something like the guy he almost killed, the 8th guy that ended up getting away. It's because he ended up kissing him, and any form of affection he didn't know how to handle. That was very close. Luckily for him, he thought it was kind of a sex, fantasy thing, and just the situation luckily played out the way it did. Because if it didn't, he would have gotten killed. But it's just because the dude didn't deserve the Michelin star he had. It's like he's that because, to be fair, it's like some heavy-ass psychological damage of, like, being abused and broken down. And I think when you actually look at it and break it down, like, there's actually a lot of parallels between him and Trish in that same regard. Parents kind of beating him down. It's more of a family thing, but more so it's like the parental like psychological damage that was inflicted upon them. And in fact, it's almost like you're not good enough, and that's kind of what pushed him to kind of be the killer that he is. Like, but that's what it was. It's like no, he's just going after people he feels like are inadequate. That he goes after people he claims are frauds, and he seeks the truth, and that's his pictures and stuff like that. That's what's supposed to be kind of him capturing their truth or whatever. He's just a twisted dude. But everything that he's done, like the trap he set up with the bodies and stuff like that, kind of giving Trish like, hey, you can come after me or you can go save your sister. Well, save Jessica. So that was a whole interesting thing. But I like that. Like, obviously, it's just a lot of like detective work of like. Once again, it's not even like we're going after someone with powers. It's like some regular dude who's just a serial killer, and it's just not being able to, get him on everything. And, the struggle that Jessica has of trying to do that, take him down, once again, the right way. But then also the, like, clashing she has with Trish, because Trish is like, oh, we should do it this way. Because Trish is kind of like, because for her, she has a clear point of view. Like, for her, everything is very black and white. For her, it's just kind of like, hey, you're on the right side of things, you're on the right side of things. But as the season went on, she kind of realized just how complicated things were. Because it's like, even when she's on the right side of things, trying to do things the right way, the fact of the matter is the bad guys still have a tendency to win. And that's so crazy to me, too, because it's like, And it's sad too because there was that message that draft she had written out to Jessica. Like she had written something actually very sweet at first, but then she deleted it and it was like, "Oh, I'm your moral compass. Without me, you don't know what the difference is between good and bad." And it's like, and it's so ironic in the long run because that ended up becoming Trish instead of Jessica because Jessica was willing to kind of see things that Trish wasn't, because she wanted to still believe no matter what she did, she was still in the right, because it's like, oh, these evil people, Salinger, he needs to die, he's a terrible person. I mean, obviously, like I said, at first she was okay with going down the route of like, oh, we're going to take him down, but it's just like he kept skirting the line, just so many other circumstances coming into play like that. I just thought it was kind of fascinating. And just the parallels of like Jessica becoming more and more heroic while Trish is becoming more and more evil. And I thought that was so interesting because that's one of the things I did not see coming. I didn't expect her to kind of basically turn into the villain of the story. Did not see that coming. I was like, oh, they butt heads, but eventually they come together. But it's like, no. Trish started going further and further off the deep end to the point like as she started losing herself. I'm like, huh. Because I was wondering if it was supposed to be a thing kind of similar to Alyssa's thing of like her powers, like it did something to her brain. I was thinking it was kind of something like that, but it's like, no, like it's just kind of her, sadly. I mean, it's kind of like everything Dorothy, and I thought that was such a beautiful episode that like basically a lot of the details in the episode we already got, but now we get like her perspective and we kind of see like, oh, there's more to it, like that dirty cop that they used to get rid of the evidence who helped them in that. I was like, oh, it looks like Jessica killed him, but it's like, no, it was actually Trish who did, but it was by accident and Eric was a part of it. And that's got to be so twisted with the whole Eric situation of like, oh yeah, here's like, for the first time, like obviously you're always around all these evil people and stuff like that. I'm going to end up forgetting it, but hopefully I don't. I really like that too. It's like, oh, Eric, you can be, it's like, oh, like how you'd go after Capone like how they went after Capone on tax evasion. We can go after him after, for kidnapping and stuff like that, rather than the other murders. At the very least, it'll put him away for a while. And Eric needed to testify. It would mean admitting to the blackmail, but he'd be in jail. But someone with his ability, surrounded by a whole bunch of Salingers, like a whole bunch of killers and terrible people, that would, like, we see that it literally can kill him to do that. So Jessica didn't want him to do it, but Trish was obviously like, if I were in his shoes, I'd obviously do it. But, and Jessica brings up the point of, I signed up for this, you signed up for this, he didn't. And that decision has massive ramifications in many different regards. Well, one in those particular regards ended up being, well, let me circle back to what I was bringing up before because I knew I was going to forget it. So let me try and remember. Right. The point I was making was about Eric's situation of like the moment that first guy died, he was like, oh my God. It feels like there's like a weight lifted off him. It almost felt like the world was balanced again. There was a little bit more like, to the world and stuff like that. And I thought that was so fascinating. It's almost sad in a way, just because it's kind of like, oh, like someone dying kind of did that. I mean, he was an evil person, sure, but still it kind of doesn't make it right or okay, type of situation. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. But getting back to it, another thing I was about to reference earlier was like Dorothy's death. Didn't see that coming. I brought it up earlier. I thought, like, if anyone was going to die this season, it was going to be Costa. I did not expect it to be Dorothy. That was so heart-wrenching, but I think, obviously, storytelling-wise, that did such a beautiful job in playing out because the fact of the matter is, Trish was already kind of balancing, teetering. Dorothy's death is what, like, snapped something in her and kind of sent her on the path that she went down, like doing everything to do. Even the person they were trying to beat up to make it seem like, oh yeah, like Trish had nothing to do with that. I mean, that Jessica had nothing to do with that dead cop. But it's like Trish ended up losing herself and ended up killing the dude anyway. And, Eric wanted nothing to do with it. But at that point, Trish had kind of snapped and it's like, no. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make the world a better place. Just getting so lost and deluded because like no matter what they did, they try to lock her up later on to make her kind of confront everything because it's like you want to keep going until all the evil is gone, but what happens when you become that evil? And at that moment, like, Malcolm had brought that up to her, she was actually speechless because she didn't really know. It never really occurred to her. But for her, because she was so intent on believing she was in the right in this situation. And just obviously, once again, like the parallels, to Jessica, like I said, I had a feeling going into this that this would be the season that she does, obviously steps up her hero game and really kind of earns the title of being a hero. And I can't stress that enough. And I love that that's the progression of her story, because she always, she complains about it the entire season of like, man, oh man, I miss the days when I didn't give a shit, because giving a shit is just like the worst thing ever, because it puts you in these positions you don't want to be in, I mean, like, because the thing is, like, and that's I think one of the moments that kind of breaks you a little bit is seeing Jessica break down. Like, she kind of goes by herself and she kind of breaks down a little bit. Because Jessica doesn't do that in front of anyone else. Because for her, it's like, I'm the superhero. I'm supposed to be super strong. And that was even why, like, that whole situation with Salinger in the first place kind of bothered her. Because it's like, I'm the hero. I'm supposed to be super strong. I'm supposed to be invulnerable. The fact is, she was a victim. And she didn't like that. Because I'm sure in her mind, it probably took her back to the whole Kilgrave situation. That made her feel like a victim. And she didn't want to feel like that. So that's why she was intent of like, no, I'm not going to be the victim. If I can get the guy who stabbed me, then it doesn't make me a victim anymore. That was kind of her justification for it. I love, Jessica's complicated relationship with obviously Malcolm, and her complicated relationship with Jerry. Because obviously, like, Jessica still found herself relying on Malcolm a lot. Like, obviously, at the beginning, it seemed like they were still where they were at the very end of season 2, not talking to each other, having, like, one words with each other, but that was about it. But then, like, eventually, Jessica still kind of relied on him. Obviously, he still wanted to work for Jerry so he can get paid to do what he wants to do, but obviously, there was an extent to how far he was willing to go, especially with, like, the whole Salinger thing. It's like, I'm not willing to side with a dude who, kills a whole bunch of people. He's a serial killer, so I know he's a terrible human being, but going to her relationship with Jerry, because for her, once again, it's like, Jerry, like, you should stop before you lose my, because once again, it's like, she does respect Jerry. Like, Jerry does the complicated things she does, but she still is like, you can literally turn back from this, but Jerry didn't want to. And on multiple occasions, Jessica has to go to her to be like, stop doing what you're doing. Obviously, like, eventually blackmailing Trish. Once again, it's like, you are on this platform so, like, anti-superpower people, but the moment it involves someone that you care about, Ketch, in this situation, you want to help her, and it's like, dealing with that Dimitri situation, you're trying to blackmail Trish into doing it. I love that Trish had her foot to your throat and everything. That was, being like, you do this for me. It's like, once again, you don't, because it's sad, because, like, it seems like almost that's all Jerry knows how to do. It's like, when people, when she wants something, like, that's her whole thing. Like, she can't just straight up do things the right way. She has to be like, no, I'm gonna go about manipulating people and stuff like that. And it's not even Jessica's, like, literally even referencing Dorothy. Dorothy was not the greatest person, but the fact of the matter is, even in her death, she was trying to do good. You're literally, and that was from her not knowing she was going to die. You literally know you're dying, and yet, what are you doing? It's like, you're trying to help people out and stuff like that. You're trying to make up for stuff. But even Jessica was like, why does that still sound like, almost like it's rehearsed, almost like you have ulterior motives? It's never, like, simple with Jerry. Like, she's always trying to get something. She's always trying to maneuver and manipulate. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, that was her ultimate undoing, because everything she's ever done was for self-interest. Even if it seemed it was for another person, it's like, it's because I love you and stuff like this. It's like, no, like, even Kith wasn't like, it wasn't out of love. It's because, one, you didn't want to die alone, and it's like, here's an ex. So when I cared about one point in time, rather than just trying to win that person back, and just, you blasted everything about Peter, out there, because it's like, you wanted to destroy their marriage, not just so it's like, you can be there to warm, like, that's super messed up all on its own. But it's like, the fact that you made it public, because you knew if you made, told her just by herself, it wouldn't be enough. You knew you were in the wrong because you were hesitant to do it. But then the moment you hear her talk more and more about Peter, you were jealous. You were like, no, that piece of crap doesn't deserve her. She should be mine. And she was more like a possession rather than like, it makes everything you do, seem like it has an ulterior motive. So it brings into question everything you do, even if it seems like out of kindness you do what you do. It's just a whole complicated mess. What I also liked about Jessica in this season too was her admitting that at first she was like, I always said I never wanted this, but maybe on some level there's a part of me that, be called a hero. It feels great, I also like there was another point in this, when it was dealing with Gregory's past, like about that missing student Nathan, that situation where it's like the thing worse than being called a monster is being someone's savior. I was like, that's so interesting. But also at the same time, it's like for her, there's a part of her that wants to be a hero. And I feel like obviously, like, kind of going to what I was bringing up earlier about Gregory and the whole like, oh yeah, like he overcompensated, like all those degrees he got because he felt inferior to other people. So he needed to overcompensate to be like, oh, look at me, look at me. He hates other people who are special because to him, it's like, oh, they got the cheat code. I had to work hard to get my special, blah blah blah. Once again, kind of the parallels between him and Trish. Trish wanted to feel special because both of them are filling some holes that they had in their souls and just who they were. I mean, that's kind of Malcolm is in that same realm too. I'm like, I don't really know myself. Whereas like you have Jessica figuring herself out as a hero, still not knowing where she stands, but still leaning more to the hero side of things, where you had like Jerry being a mix of everything, but kind of leaning heavily villain just because of all the dickish things that she does. I was actually kind of surprised Eric ended up disappearing for a good chunk of like the middle of the season like that. To be fair, he's looking after his sister and everything, but it still kind of took me by surprise. I thought he was going to be he plays pivotal roles in the season, but I thought he was going to be like a constant. I guess like a good comparison would be like, oh, I'm blanking because it's been a little while. The girl that Frank meets in season 2 of The Punisher. It's been a while, so I'm blanking a little bit, so I do apologize. I thought it was going to be kind of similar type of thing like that, like him being around Jessica a lot more than he was, but it's like, no, he disappears for a little while. I mean, not disappears. He was, like I said, looking after his sister Barry, which that was kind of, Brianna, but Barry. That was kind of interesting, the whole her and Malcolm situation, because she kind of looks at Malcolm like he's a good person, and so does Zaya, but that was the thing for Malcolm. It's like, I'm not a good person. The fact is, I've done some very bad things. And the thing is, for him, it's like, I'm not even trying to blame other people. I made the choice to do those bad things. There's something in me, I referenced it earlier, but I really do, like I said, like appreciate the parallels when like that episode where it's like, oh yeah, like we get a look at Trisha's past. We kind of get to see like, well, we got bits and pieces to who Dorothy was. Like obviously she kind of stayed the same, but I think even with the complicated thing is that no, she wasn't the perfect person, but the fact of the matter is she was still trying to make amends. And her and Trish obviously had their issues over the course of even this season, but they were repairing it. And I was actually kind of surprised it kind of put Dorothy on a bit of a redemption arc. Like obviously, like even when she's trying to help Trish, she still has her own ulterior motives and everything, but still like you can tell she loved her daughter in the only way she could. But then you also hear from Trish like what they came from, like her, Trish's dad being abusive and stuff like that. You kind of understand that it definitely broke something in both Trish and her mom, and it broke something in her mom, and that breaking in her mom broke something inside of Trish. Like it was just like this endless cycle of just so much pain, But the point I was making, like, I like that obviously as she's going further down that Hellcat road, just kind of and that's the thing too, like Hellcat's a hero in the comic books, if I'm not, I don't think she's an anti-hero. Maybe she is. I looked it up a little while back, but that's about it. I never went too far into it. Side note, I think all the costumes, like I'm sure all the costumes she was trying on earlier in the season, I'm like, those are probably references that I'm not getting. I'm wondering if the last one's supposed to be something like that's legitimately tied to her, or is that supposed to be a different character? I'm sure it was probably like, the last one she was like, oh, no. I'm sure that one was actually probably a Hellcat costume from the comic books, maybe. I thought her costume was kind of like purplish or something. Maybe it's not. Once again, it's like, I try not to look too much stuff up, so like, I looked it up a while back. It's been a long time. I want to say probably when I originally watched season 2, maybe. Nevertheless. But the point I was trying to make is I don't think Hellcat's a villain in the comic books, but I like that they kind of put her in that role. Because it's not like a straight up like, oh, she's pure evil. It's like, no. It took a lot of circumstances to break up someone trying to be a hero into that. Because the fact is she was becoming and to me, this will always be something I love. Like, this is the parallels I put between Trish's story and Danny's story. Why did Danny become the Iron Fist? Because he was broken inside. He thought becoming the Iron Fist would fix him in some shape or form. And that's what Trish did. Like, Trish was broken by her mom, and we kind of see that of, like, her mom pushing her to be this and that, like, being like, oh, you have to be perfect because everything and everyone relies on you. You fail, everything else kind of falls apart. Like, on the show, it's like, oh, if you don't do well, everyone else is going to suffer. They don't have the money to feed their family. Like, you don't put that type of pressure on a child, and that kind of got twisted and warped to the point that Trish is like, oh, I'm doing the right thing, I'm doing good. Like, obviously this is like building heavily off of, like, you know, what she did in season 2, her hero complex, because she needed to feel like a hero. She needed to feel special because her mom had warped her into be like, oh, you got to embrace your special, you got to be something special because you are special. It's a whole complicated mess. It's sad that Dorothy kind of made her like that. And Dorothy, you know, even at one part kind of realizes that she's like, I, you know, was kind of hoping that I hadn't done too much damage to you, but now I look at you, it's like, you know, the damage is done. Like, you know, Dorothy kind of became she realized that when, like, you know, Trish threw everything at her, being like, the fact of the matter is your mood swings would end with bruises on me. Because obviously, you know, throwing me to, like, some older guy for a role and stuff like that, that being the whole Max situation we learned about last season. So just how that was structured, I think, fit very nicely, you know? I also love the situation of, obviously, it's a conversation I kind of talked about when it came to the trailer, was the whole thing of, like, are you still a hero when no one else thinks you are? And, you know, that's what Trish had asked. And, like, Jessica was like, I don't care what people think. And to me, the reason why I bring that up is because, obviously, it almost seems like at every turn, everyone wants to make an excuse just so they don't have to look at Jessica as a hero, because it's like, oh, you're something else. It's like almost treating her non-human. It's like, wait, what? Like, she's a creature or something like that. Like, when they dealing with Gregory's past and stuff like that, the sheriff in that town didn't really want to operate with her because the video of her, you know, being, you know, because it's like, oh, Gregory, the fact of the matter is that's not the kid I knew being a serial killer and stuff like that. Have you seen him in a couple of years? Like, that don't mean diddly squat, you know? But obviously she was more averted because, like, obviously, like, he had swung public opinion to be like, oh, Jessica's abusing him and stuff like that. I do like the interview that she gave to, what was it? It's that reporter who pops up in a lot of the Marvel, a lot of his Netflix stuff. I do like the interview where, like, Jessica's like, obviously Jessica's Jessica, and it's like, oh, could you know, not cuss and stuff like that? It's like, can you get your head out your own ass and stuff like that? Being like, bam, all these murders, bam, it was Gregory who did it. It's like, oh, what about that other mass vigilante who's kind of, you know, a bit unhinged? And I love Trish being in another room being unhinged. I'm not unhinged. Foreshadowing and just the irony behind that statement, it's just crazy, you know? And you know what I love, and I thought was kind of a beautiful thing to kind of, once again, Jessica's heroism. She actually took Salinger down the right way. It's like, oh, I got him on recording, like, all the stuff about, like, what he did and stuff like that. And I love how she tore into him, being like, oh, the fact of the matter is Dorothy had her issues and stuff like that, but she was always herself. She never told lies. She was never a fraud. She was always simply herself through and through. The fact of the matter is you killed her because you enjoyed it. Like, you're trying to justify it like, oh, these people are frauds and blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, you get off to it. And ended up, you know, it's like, hey, lo and behold, Jessica ended up tricking him into everything. Like, I kind of had a feeling like there was something more to, like, when she was like, all right, time to get to work. I'm like, and then she kind of gets drugged by the drink and everything. I'm like, oh, okay, this is probably part of the plan and stuff. And lo and behold, turns out to be the case. But that's my point. She took him down legitimately, even helped Costa, you know, like, come back from his suspension and everything. I'm like, that's so good. Sadly, that got completely undermined when Trish went in there and killed him, stomped his head in, blood splattering on the wall. I was like, Jesus, that's gnarly. But obviously for Jessica, that was like the last straw, because it's like, because for her, she was trying to fix it. But I love that being a message too of, like, to fix it, like, the price is too steep because the price would cost you too much. Because that's even something Trish was saying. It's like, Jessica doesn't have what it takes, you know, the sacrifice that's necessary. And it's like, what is the sacrifice? And Trish was like, everything. To do what is right, you need to sacrifice everything. But that's the thing of a hero. Heroes got to have lines that are not willing to cross. You go too far and everything, you know. I even love that whole thing of Hogarth being like, yeah, you can tell her that I won't say anything, that, that I'm nothing like Gregory and stuff like that. Because that was the first time you've seen her terrified like that. Once again, it's like, after your previous experience with Kilgrave, you thought you would have learned a lesson, but, sadly you didn't. So I thought that was kind of good. I mean, she had her moments of being like, oh yeah, when she stepped up for Kitsch at the end, looking out for her and being like, no, you take me, I can get you out of town, Trish. I also love the fact is that obviously at one point, like, Jessica had to save Salinger from Trish. That was incredible. Like, I also love the fact is, it's like, oh yeah, Jessica being like, she's not as strong or can't jump as far as me. So Jessica literally threw her to another roof because she knew that Trish could never make the jump back. I was like, that's pretty interesting. And the fact that Salinger's kind of enjoying it, being like, oh, the fact of the matter is you're going to, have to protect me. I don't know what's worse. The fact is that you're having to protect me or that you're having to fight your friend over protecting me, So, and not just your friend, your best friend, your sister. D-Bad was kind of enjoying it. I thought that was kind of, it kind of feeds into the plan a little bit when obviously she was like looking for the camera in the room. I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, Jessica's really good at what she does. She looked at the picture of like when he took that evidence of, her attacking him, which also Trish messed him up bad, clawed in his face like that. It's like, oh my God, also, because I love that wound never went away. Those wounds were so deep. I mean, to be fair, like, who knows what the time frame is for the entire season, but those wounds never healed. He stayed super messed up ever since she clawed his face like that. But like I was just saying, I just thought it was pretty impressive that Jessica, she's very good at what she does. There's never been a doubt of that. But it's sad, when the final confrontation comes down, it's like she has to face off against Trish. She didn't want that because it's like, I have to prove to you how far off the reservation you've gone. It's like, look at this situation. Here you are, and, here's, Eric there, and he's so close to her that he's starting to bleed from his eyes. That means you're potentially just as bad as Salinger. I mean, to be fair, like, it made him bleed and stuff like that. I feel like Salinger hurt him a lot more to be near, just touching and stuff like, but it kind of showed how far she had fallen. But it's like, no, Trish tried to be like, no, he's a liar. In fact, you can't trust him and stuff like that, so that's what kind of surprised me though. Like, once again, it's like, I didn't expect Trish's story to play out the way it did. I was like, are we going to cover up all the stuff that she did? But it's like, no, there's no covering it up. Like, it's clear cut. Like, Jessica knew what she had to do. She didn't want to do it. It took advice from your boy Luke. I was like, what? I lost my damn mind when I saw Mike Coulter's name in the opening credits. I was like, what? Yes! It felt good. It felt like out of anyone, it makes sense that it would be Luke that comes to kind of talk to her. To be fair, especially because because obviously we're picking up where Luke left off in season 2. Obviously, sadly, we'll never get the conclusion of that, but I do like a little bit of him being like, oh yeah, here, I'm still the kind of same dude under the suit. I like that he makes the comparison to obviously him and Willis. It's like, I was in a complicated situation. She's like, send him to prison. He's like, worse. I sent him to the raft. And it's like, I kind of had to, it was the right thing to do. And basically telling Jessica, like, he knows you're Jessica Jones. I know you'll do the right thing in the end, because it's not going to be an easy thing. It's going to be hard, And I just thought that was kind of interesting. I also like because it makes sense that it would be Luke, because obviously, once again, it's something I always bring up. But in the comic books, they are a thing. I mean, it was already a thing in the show, but obviously, it hasn't been a continuous thing. It's been complicated. But still, I just thought that was so nice. I was like, last little final connection to the other shows and stuff like that. I thought was kind of nice. But once again, I didn't expect Trish and Jessica literally fighting. And I also love it too because it's like Trish is flexible, can see in the dark and stuff like that, which is kind of a nice bonus. She can't physically beat Jessica because she doesn't have superhuman strength. Like, Jessica has her in that strength advantage, but for her, to go as what she says at the end, I thought was kind of pretty powerful, is when Jessica's like, you're literally you're trying to be the good person in all of this, but you're trying to avenge your mom, but during all of this, you've become your mom. And the fact of the matter is, who's going to be next? Am I going to be next? The fact of the matter is, Trish took out a knife and was going to stab Jessica, literally stabbed her through the hand, but Jessica ended up having to put her down. I mean, not put her down, but still. You know, I would have never thought of that. And that's the toughest thing. Like, because I think you can almost make this be like a comparison in many different regards. She pulled the trigger when it came to, you know, Kilgrave. Obviously, metaphorically speaking, because she, you know, snapped his neck. But the metaphorical trigger was not pulled when it came to Alyssa, because it was actually, you know, Trish who did that. So I think it's kind of neat how that kind of works out like that, because it's like season 1 she killed the bad guy, and that was the point she was trying to get across to Trish. It's like I killed Kilgrave and it almost destroyed me, but she was like, but you know, and Trish was like, but it didn't. In fact, the matter is, maybe that's my real superpower. I can carry that burden, and honestly, I don't think she can. The whole burden was going to be the fact of the matter is of like, Gregory's in jail. The fact of the matter is it a satisfying ending? No. Are we going to be 100% okay from this situation? No, but we're going to have to find a way to keep going. And it seemed like maybe Trish was okay with that. I figured something more had to go down, because I was like, there's one more episode, but I was like, oh, I thought he was going to get away, cause more havoc or something like that. It's like, no. She's the one that ended up causing havoc and everything. And it's sad that things played out that way. But even Jessica, you know, because Eric's like, oh, this is all my fault because I brought this into your life and everything. It's like, no, Jessica's like, this whole thing with Trish, it was literally bound to happen, because, you know, it was stuff set in motion way before now. It's a combination of her upbringing plus her being the one that killed Alyssa was kind of where it really hit its stride of big boom, like that's where the real big shift happened. But it started long ago, so it was just, sadly, Trish was a ticking time bomb, sadly, and it's sad, you know, I keep saying that over and over again, I do apologize, but, you know, Jessica having to take down her sister like that, you know, handling Salinger the way she did, of like, oh, I'm gonna not kill him, I'm gonna do things the right way, you know, rather than handling things the way I did in the past. But also, obviously, still kind of handling things in a similar sense the same way, because she did everything she did to try and protect Trish, whether it was get rid of evidence that would have sent Gregory away. She did everything she could to protect Trish, because, you know, because the sad thing is, when it's all said and done, Trish is the last family she has left. Like, yeah, things were between her and Dorothy. They weren't the closest, but Dorothy was still family. So she literally had no one. Now it's like sending, like, the last person in her family away, because, like, once you go to the raft, ain't no real coming back from that type of situation. And it's like, Jesus, you know? I just thought that was kind of pretty neat how they handled that like that. Once again, I didn't see things kind of ending the way they did, but I think it's a nice conclusion in their stories that, like, of course they'd kind of rush each other, you know, meet and collide like this. And, you know, she walks away a villain, because it took, like, you know, Costa bringing up everything that she did for, you know, Trish to be like, I'm the bad guy. I'm the bad guy. I like that song a lot. I don't know why it didn't click in my head until just now. Nevertheless, I'm going on a fucking tangent. I do apologize. But, you know, Jessica is a, you know, bona fide hero now, all in the newspapers and stuff. It's sad, though, that things obviously didn't work out with her and Eric. I did like the fact is Eric was like, oh, you know, you're saying I'm a good, like, hey, the fact is I can become better at this whole hero thing. I'm going to work with you. But it's like, you're a good guy, Eric, but I can't trust you. But I do like the fact is that she set him and Coast up. And I'm like, that's neat. Like, I'm sure, like, in the comic books, he might be somebody. Like, if I probably looked it up, it'd probably be like, oh, he's insert superhero. Or maybe he's someone specific for the show. Either way. But I do like the fact is that, you know, because Jessica was kind of walking away from everything. She gives everything over to Malcolm, and it's like, okay, you kind of run Alias now. Don't screw it up. Because there was kind of nothing keeping her there anymore, because the only family she had is gone. Everything else is still kind of, it just would have been just a reminder to stay behind. But I obviously, like, you know, Eric and, like I said, Costa working together. Where things stood with Malcolm, because obviously things between him and Zaya, that wasn't good. Whether things continued between him and Barry, who knows. And then there's the other thing that I really like, because obviously it's like, okay, will Jerry get her comeuppance? And lo and behold, she kind of does, because, you know, Kit, she walks away at the end, because it's like, I don't know, like, everything you did was because it was it was a desperate situation that basically you created. The fact of the matter is, it's like, I get it. You don't want to die alone, but that's what's going to happen. It's like, Jesus. It's like, I'm grateful for all that you did. You were willing to sacrifice yourself for me and everything, but it's like, everything you do, once again, everything you do has an ulterior motive. Like, you never do anything for selfless reasons. Everything you've done, all that, like, once again, like, that was the whole message behind the season 2 of, like, ruining other people's lives. Like, the lives that, you know, got destroyed in the process of all of this, like, you know, and because once again, no one's the villain of their own story. Everyone thinks they're the hero of their own story. And even in Jerry's own way, she thought she was the hero of, like, oh, here I am, I'm rescuing this woman I love, I can be with her in my last days. Hell, she was even asking Jessica, like, oh, when it's all said and done, I want you to put me down with the pills and stuff like that. But then she became less about the end and more about, like, oh, how I'm gonna live my life, the journey and everything. She found her new love again. Her old love was becoming her new love again, so she thought things would change. That was actually kind of interesting, because even Luke, and I think that in itself, sadly, we'll never get to see it, but I think that's where season 3 of Luke Cage would have gone, because he was like, oh, if there was ever anyone that's going to put me down, I need it to be you. Because I figured out of anyone that could mess him up, it's either be Jessica strong enough or Danny is. To be fair, Danny's not down, you know, he's not in New York anymore right now, dealing with his own, him and Ward, obviously off on their own adventures, but him being like, if I ever kind of went off the end, like, you know, basically I would want someone who gave enough of a shit about me to put me down. And it's like, you know, Jessica kind of been hearing stuff like that, you know, enough. So, but I don't know if she's at that point. She would. I mean, especially handling, I mean, obviously it's Trish, so obviously, you know, she wasn't going to cross that line. But it's like, if it came down to Luke, would she? Or would she kind of try and smack some sense into him? I don't know. It's something interesting, but I think that's an element we could probably have winked and nodded towards, being like, oh yeah, that's what you could potentially have suspected. Like, because obviously where Luke's story was taking him in season 3, potentially, you get little hints to it, and I think that might have played a role in it. I was curious. There was part of me, like, when she was leaving, I was like, please tell me you're going to Harlem. Harlem. Oh, you're not going to Harlem. You're trying to go, you know, far, far away. But then it's like, I like the little thing at the end of, like, oh, it's Kilgrave being like, yeah, just walk away and let everyone else handle it. But in that moment, I think, like, the hero inside her was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Or, like, that'd be too easy. So maybe that's her going more vigilante. Well, it's still being her hero thing, but maybe she's not doing the whole alias thing. Rather than being, like, a private investigator, this might be the steps towards her just going, like, nah, full-blown hero, baby. Like, you know, because I love that whole conversation come up, too, because obviously Trish, like, covered up her face most of the season and stuff like that. It's like, oh, probably would have been a good time to have the mask, but, you know, for Jessica, it's like, literally, there's no point now. I'm too high profile. Literally, too many people know my face and what I do and everything, so it's too late for a rebrand like that, so I thought that was kind of pretty neat. It was kind of, like I said, I think it ends very detective noir. Like, every season kind of ends like that. It's not like everything ends on like a, yeah, we won. Every season ended on kind of a somber note. Season 1, the whole Kilgrave thing, it didn't fix everything. Things were still in shambles. Season 2, everything was in shambles. There was some good, but things were still kind of shit. Same thing in this. Like, literally, one of the last scenes is like you literally watching your sister being carted off to the raft, but it's like, she kind of gives you the nod to kind of be like, it's okay, like, you're doing the right thing. You were the hero in this situation. Thank you for stopping me. I feel like that nod kind of says all that, like, Trish kind of realizes. I mean, and I would have loved to also see, like, what that would mean for Trish's story going forward. Like I said, she's a full-blown villain in a certain regard, but maybe, you know, I don't know if there would have been a redemption to make her into a hero going forward, would she have gotten a chance, but it's just, it's so crazy to think her story. Once again, you never would have thought things would be there. Hell, Jessica probably never thought in a million years that things would come down to that, but she kind of knew it was a possibility just because, like, yeah, this was a long time coming, Sally, just because everything Trish has been through. So, yeah, like, well, once again, like, in my opinion, this is a great way to end things off. It does seem like, because I will admit, I try not to read up into this stuff ahead of time and stuff like that, so it might be something I'll end up looking up afterwards, but I am curious, and it was kind of my question going into this, whether or not this was, oh, we're planned for this to be the final season, or was it a situation of, like, everything got canceled and it just happened to be, this ends up being the final season by proxy, you know, because I'm pretty sure they were already a good chunk of the way through this, production-wise, before it got canceled, if I remember correctly, like, before everything started slowly getting canceled. Like, I feel like this was already kind of in the works and stuff like that. So I'm curious, like, if there were any last minute changes to the story and stuff like that, because they knew like, oh, we're getting canceled, so let's wrap this up in a certain way, because they leave enough stuff open to be like, okay, like obviously the whole Luke and Jessica thing, like obviously that's a different thing, but like obviously I'm wondering if that was something they set up before it would have, once again, probably would have played a little bit into Luke Cage's story, probably that, and probably Iron Fist most likely would, just because of, like the dynamics between Danny and Luke, as well as Luke and Jessica, that whole situation. But even like the whole Kilgrave thing at the end there, because that was something I was going into this. We saw Kilgrave kind of still being a part of, reminding him, being like, oh, I'll be here when you need me, and it's like he never came up until the very end. So I guess you could almost look at it as something sinister, being like, maybe that shift inside of Jessica might have been happening in that moment. I don't think so. I think that was her kind of being like, you know what, I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of me kind of walking away. It's like, no, I'm going to do this hero thing. I might stumble along the way like I have before, but I'm ready to stand up and be the hero that they need me to be. That type of thing. I don't know. You know what? Malcolm's story would have been like going forward about Jerry. Once again, I don't know how much of this was like, oh, this is the end. So it's like thing of like, not every story needs to have a conclusive ending. You can be like, imagine, especially Jerry's story, because like she literally has no one now. She doesn't have Malcolm. Her firm's probably kind of in the shitter after everything. Probably gonna be okay. What that means for like Zaya and Malcolm, obviously things play out the way they did there. Once again, Eric and Costa would be something interesting to see what that would mean going forward. But also, like I said, I would have assumed we'd get like Jessica Jones and Hellcat working together going forward. It's like, no, she's in prison, so that was interesting. So like I said, I think either way, whether everything was 100% planned, whether there were last minute changes, I think they did a good job of making this the end all be all. It is sad to know not only that this is the final season of Jessica Jones, but this is the end of everything Marvel related on Netflix. And I've loved these shows. I know people have their favorites, their likes, their dislikes. I've loved everything, and I'm glad to have been able to be a part of this ride these past 4 years now, because this all started with Daredevil back in 2015, and to everyone associated with these shows, those already canceled, Jessica Jones, from cast to staff, like to everyone behind the scenes, I wish them all the best in their future endeavors. I will say it once again, how I've always said it before, like, I hope in some shape or form, I feel like they probably will get rebooted. I don't want them to. I want a continuation of all this. Even Jessica Jones. If we can somehow miraculously in the future get a 4th season, I'd be so fucking happy. I want all these shows to come back. Once again, I know people have their likes and dislikes, especially Iron Fist. I don't give a shit. I like Iron Fist a lot. I would love to have seen what they would have done with a season 3. So that's just me. I know, like, that's just my lone opinion, and that's okay. Like, everyone's entitled to feel the way they do. But obviously, I've talked about it before. There's a whole contract thing of like, basically, Marvel can't do anything with any of these shows, like in this, like in a way like this. I think probably not even movie or anything else wise for like 2 years, just because Netflix has exclusive rights to that until that 2-year period. Then they can do something. So, with the way things are, I doubt Marvel would, even if they do something with these properties, it probably won't be something they jump on immediately. It'd probably be something way later down the road, whether it be like rebooted TV shows or whether it be full-blown movies. Who knows? I want continuations. Like, Disney owns a good chunk of Hulu that is kind of like, come on, bring these shows back in like 2-3 years, get them on Hulu. I should also state too, I think amongst all the shows, this show still has my favorite intro, because I love like that, like, because it's the most colorful of the intros, and just like the way it's stylized and everything, it's so good. So I think easily it is still my favorite opening intro for all the shows. So probably after this, it'd probably be Defenders, just because what it represents and just all the different colors, but that's kind of a cheap answer. I'm not about to do all that. Just, this is just me at this point rambling. Once again, it's that sad thing of like, at the end of a series, it's like, once it stops going, it makes it finally over, and I want it to be, Once again, from everyone, not just part of Jessica Jones, but a part of this whole crazy ride of a Marvel TV show adventure that was started so many years ago. Thank you, and I wish everyone that is associated with these projects the best of luck. But I guess at the end of it, that's really all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.